Hi, I'm Zara Amaechi. I'm a senior broadcast journalism major.
My name is Garrett Tarango. I'm also a broadcast journalism major.
Hi, I'm Tatyana Montes. I'm a senior photojournalism major.
Hey, I'm Hedges. I'm a senior digital and print major as well.
Hi, I'm Max Lockhart, and I'm a senior digital and print journalism major.
We are a senior capstone group here to share our take on the effects of the affordable housing crisis in Denton, Texas.
Like most areas in North Texas, Denton has witnessed impressive growth in terms of population and development in the past decade. Denton County ranked as the fourth fastest growing U.S. county in numeric growth from 2021 to 2022, according to U.S. Census statistics. The city of Denton's population is expected to continue its growth at a rapid rate. According to the Denton 2040 Comprehensive Plan, approved by the City Council in 2022, Denton's population alone is expected to grow by over 89,000 in the years between 2020 and 2040. This projected growth will undoubtedly push the envelope on issues in Denton related to affordable housing and homelessness for years to come.
Recently, the city of Denton has updated their policies towards solicitation and panhandling. We'll play a few clips from that.
This is Denton PD Lieutenant Elisa Howe in a closed city council meeting on April 18th discussing the city's ordinance involving solicitation.
The current recommendation is to not make any changes to the solicitation ordinance other than clearly excluding panhandling to align with the changes recommended in Chapter 21. Due to current legal challenges in the court, especially in Dallas, there's no other recommendations for updates to this chapter will be reviewed until the courts have made a ruling. This and the following recommendations sustain that panhandling is protected under the First Amendment right to free speech. So the updates focus on all types of solicitation, specifically when it occurs in an aggressive manner. In Chapter 21, the recommendations do three things. The first one is to remove the previous language that it's prohibited to solicit within 50 feet of an ATM outside of a building. Then it adds in definitions. One is for aggressive manner, which is defined as intentionally make any non-consensual physical contact with another person in the course of a solicitation, approach or follow a person being solicited in a manner that is intended to cause a reasonable person to be intimidated into responding affirmatively to the solicitation for fear of imminent bodily injury to oneself or another or damage to property. Aggressive manner is also defined as continuing to solicit within 5 feet of a person after the person has expressed a negative response to that solicitation. Intentionally obstructing the safe or free passage of the person being solicited, or making any threatening statement or gesture immediately before or during the solicitation or after a refusal to make a donation intended to cause a reasonable person to be intimidated into responding affirmatively. It also defines solicit or solicitation to request, ask, or beg, whether by words, bodily gestures, signs, or other means, for an immediate performance, donation of money, or other thing of value, including the purchase of an item or service for an amount far exceeding its value, under circumstances where a reasonable person will understand that the purchase is a donation. The last recommendation is to define the prohibited act and add a penalty. The prohibited act is making it unlawful to solicit in an aggressive manner. A person violating this would be subject to prosecution for a Class D misdemeanor and a fine not to exceed $500.
So I'd like to ask you guys, do you guys think those policies are too harsh? Would you make any changes to that? Do you have any agreements, disagreements?
I guess I get the business perspective of maybe they don't want people on the street, but I think with this aggressive solicitation, personally, I don't think that this is the central issue. I don't know how many resources or how many man hours they put into this aggressive solicitation bill or proposal, but I do think that I mean, if they solved the issue clearly, that we wouldn't have needed this in the first place. I get it's a hard issue, but
So I thought Kristine put it in a great perspective when she talked about criminalizing the homeless and Denton, and how activities that we consider normal in our houses, they're kind of punished for because they're doing with the lack of housing. Also, I've talked to people like with the VA, for example, and they've really highlighted how like tricky of a situation this is, and just like how difficult of a debate it is, because they work with people who are veterans, and they've walked around Denton with signs just exclaiming like, I'm a veteran, not asking for money or anything. You know, if somebody does offer them money, then by all means, great. But you know, are they soliciting, or are they just, you know, walking around with a sign? So I think it's tough. I definitely think it's a tricky situation.
going off that, you can't really go person by person, ask what their intentions are clearly. But I think there's a difference between, you know, someone being just out there that's unsheltered versus solicitation. And I'm afraid that this might affect people, you know, who don't have bad intentions. Because personally, from my experience, I've never dealt with anyone aggressively soliciting me. I've heard other people talk about it, close relatives, but even then, like, I don't know. I feel like this could maybe the intention behind this, there's good thought behind it for certain perspectives, but I also think that this could have a negative aspect of hurting people, unsheltered people who are literally just out there to be out there. The weather's nice, they don't have anywhere else to go, they're not doing anything because walking, you know, it's public property, it's a public street. People go out there, families all the time, just take photos, look at the old scenery, look at the old architecture. So I'm afraid that this might be a little too broad, but I do get the intention behind this.
Well, what do you mean when you say unsolicited you? Because I do kind of agree, seeing as out of all the interviews and all the people we've talked to, a lot of them have said things just happen like over and over again, and it was a snowball effect, and that's what caused them to lose their homes and be out on the streets, where a lot of them, it's not drugs and it's not like those stereotypes of them doing just like illegal things or just bad things that have brought them to this point in their lives. They literally just got in one accident after another and now they're here. But what do you mean when you say unsolicited you, or people haven't unsolicited you?
Like, ask me for money. I think from business perspectives, they don't want people there at all because it tarnishes, you know, the image, or it might make people wary to approach, because like you talked about, there's stereotypes of, you know, people don't want to be bothered. I mean, I'll expand broadly. I think I was a little bit surprised with everyone that I interviewed, how honest on both sides they were, because I was expecting a lot of people, or the people that worked at these organizations, to say that everything about homelessness, like all homeless people, you know, or people experiencing homelessness, they don't do anything bad. I think that I got both sides, you know. There's people, you know, like Zara said, life happens. I mean, the lady we talked with, Jane, about, like, her house burned down. There's nothing you can do about that. And something I didn't realize is that, or I didn't even think about this, it's so easy to become homeless, because if you don't have family where you're living and all your property and all your belongings are gone, you're homeless. And it's that easy. I think people think of homelessness like, oh, you know, I quit my job, I do drugs, stuff like that. Like, it's a chosen path, you know, you afflicted yourself. But it really is easy to, you know, especially if you don't have the best financial situations already, it is really easy to become homeless.
Yeah, it's like, piggybacking off, what y'all said, is it's like, yeah, it doesn't take much, whether it's a car accident, house burning down, or even worse. I mean, it's like you can't really, so if you have no family that's nearby and doesn't have the ability to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna drop money into your account, things happen.
I think that's kind of terrifying too, because we were just at our daily bread and we just talked to a woman that came up to us and talked to us about podcasting and broadcasts and everything. And her herself, she was a journalist and she got hit by a truck, like, and all of her medical bills were still there and she didn't have any way of getting back to Dallas. And it kind of left her in a position where she had nothing left. And she's still trying to recover from all the surgeries and all the accidents that happened to her. And now she's in a homeless shelter and she's trying to recover every single day and with damages to her body on top of that. And she kind of lost everything. So like going from a professional field where she is at the top of her game, she's interviewing our former president and traveling around, and she just happened to get into an accident that pushed her into this situation. Now she's here in Denton, Texas, as close as she could have gotten to Dallas, and she has nowhere else to go. She has no money. She's still recovering from her accident. It shows that like it could really happen to any of us. Like we're all journalists in our own way, and she herself was a journalist and now she's in this situation. So it really is as easy as just waking up one night to your house burning down and then just being left on the streets and having nowhere to go. But that being said, it's almost like, why isn't there more sympathy in that aspect of, instead of just assuming and stereotyping these people and saying that, oh, you put yourself in this situation, it's like, no, why aren't we asking them, how did you get here? And why don't we have those resources to help them get back on their feet faster than us having to go through all these situations and all these programs just to even find out, oh, you're now in a shelter, you know? Why isn't it so easy for them to just go and be like, hey, my house burned down, I need this, this, and this, and we provide it for them straight away, or at least are working to provide it for them. Yeah.
Max, going off the aggressive solicitation, so is the proposal to put up signs that
Yeah, so what they're kind of alternatively suggesting is instead of allowing solicitation to happen, to place signs instead that direct people to I believe the United Way of Denton County like barrier fund, which I would love to ask you guys about because a lot of people have questions about their transparency, and like people want to know where the money is going. And like people experiencing homelessness don't have direct access to, there's not like a bank account that United Way of Denton County has that like people can just dip into at any time. There's, it's bureaucratic and it's allocated to people experiencing homelessness at their discretion. Do you guys think there needs to be like more transparency in that, or do you guys have any other thoughts?
so United Way would then distribute to clients? Is that the thought process?
Yeah, or just however they choose to budget, so it can go towards caseworking. But like I guess people I've talked to, their concern is that like nobody really knows. So that's just something that people talk about.
It's a really touchy subject because like, and this is with any organization, it can be for any organization. Like you could even argue with like Salvation Army or places like that. It's like, unless you're truly behind the scenes within those organizations, you have no clue where that money's going from. You don't want to jump to conclusions of, you don't want to think people are maybe pocketing money, but you never know. And with aggressive panhandling like you were talking about, it's like I've never been in any situation where somebody's come and physically knocked on my window to ask for money. It's just simple, like what you say, guy saying I'm a veteran, not saying anything or doing anything wrong. I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal for them to be out on the streets.
Yeah, I think it's very complex and multifaceted. I think United Way of Denton County is doing the best that they can with their resources, and I think others are just upset that they're not seeing necessarily, like you said, the full inner workings of what's going on. And some articles have been posted. Some people, have become homeless, waiting for assistance. That nonprofits such as United Way of Denton County is expected to provide, as well as other nonprofits in Denton County. And I'm not sure. I'm not trying to like go too much into one area, but yeah, it speaks on how it speaks on how there's a need for more direct access to funds, and maybe a discussion on how homelessness outreach and assistance is being handled in Denton.
I mean, it's like how Jane said, it's as simple as just asking. Like, the resources are there, the money is there. They're just not promoting it. They're not putting it out there. Why? I feel like that's the question that should be asked more. Like, why isn't it out there? Why isn't it promoted? And why isn't it easily accessible? If people are going to Jane's store and knocking on it saying, hey, I need this help. I need a ride. I need this amount of money. And all they're doing is calling and asking. It's only a phone call away. And she herself said a majority of the time, all they have to do is pick up a phone and then just say, fine, that's it. So it makes me skeptical on why they're making it so much harder than it is. Not to say that they aren't trying their hardest. Obviously, this is a really complex situation that also not only affects people without homes, but people with homes and how they, live their day-to-day lives. Less on the people that already have their homes, but still it's a very complex and uncomfortable situation to go about. But it does make you question why is it so much harder to get through and understand where's that money going towards, where the resources being provided, and why isn't it that easily accessible? You said like the Salvation Army, we don't really know where that money 100% is going to, but we just assume that it is going to a charitable cause. But we all thought that about, well, I don't know if I'm allowed to call people out, but we all thought that about the Red Cross. We thought they were putting all their money into things, and it kind of changed our views on both of those nonprofits, on what they were actually trying to do. What were they trying to benefit from lying, or what were they benefit from pocketing the money, and where's that money going to? And then taking a seat back and looking around us and seeing how it actually affected everyone. Now it kind of gave reason to why things aren't getting fixed, and more so why I'm donating all these, this money, and I'm trying to help out, but it's not really going anywhere.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not accusing, United Way and all that. I mean, I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, I mean, we don't know.
Mhm.
I'm not accusing them, saying, oh, you're pocketing a portion of the donations. I'm not saying that. But it's like when you don't know 100% what's going on, and then people are getting put in very bad spots because they are waiting for, some money to be able to eat, or to be able to stay in a shelter, or whatever. It's something that definitely needs to be visited.
Yeah, I also think as we've been like going through interviews, like not a lot of these organizations are working together, and they also all like despise each other. Like they just are like, there's so many differences in each organization. So like not having that communication of let's work to fight homelessness all together is really hard. Just being able to have those funds flowing and knowing like, okay, we've helped this person at this organization, so that like they're good now. I think that's really hard to do when the organizations as a whole aren't working together, and they're kind of just fighting against each other as well as fighting against homelessness. So it's really hard to do.
There's always going to be that like confusion and disconnect in a city like Denton. When you live in a city like Denton, it's small, it is growing, but it's small. And you're right next to Dallas. So Denton's always going to want to be like Dallas, like as big as Dallas or as progressive as Dallas. So when it comes to that disconnect, it's almost like you have a portion of people that want to grow and progress in every way that they possibly can to become a bigger city and a more noticeable and recognizable city. And then you have a portion of people that are just kind of like, that doesn't really matter. We're never going to get there if we still have people without homes just on the streets. We kind of have to fix within to rise up. And then you have a portion of people that are like, none of that matters. We have to put our money towards, you know, other things, all the other little things, and infrastructures and like jobs and new restaurants and just gentrifying the area in general. So there's always going to be that crossroad of where do we want to go as a city. I think they need to plan out where they actually want to go as a city so that they can fully understand, okay, this is how we're going to help people, so that, like you said, like the tiny villages, if that helps progress Denton as a city, then that's needed. That's a necessity. That's something that they should focus on building so that the whole city of Denton progresses with it and it becomes normalized rather than just being an idea that's on the side that everyone's kind of like, why is that there? What is that? They know what it is and they know that it's there so that they can just go straight to it and it's not questioned.
And to add to that confusion, I've spoken with people such as Tracy Duckworth who have kind of accused a place like a shelter like Our Daily Bread, accused them of being kind of like a monopoly and like kind of taking part in like monopolistic practices, I guess, because they're the only option. So again, it kind of just adds to the confusion. Like we want all of these different nonprofits, you know, there's at least 14 of them. We want them to all be on the same page, but also we don't like one, like if one has all the power and if we don't like what they're doing and we think they're abusing that power, then that's also a problem. So it's a fine line that we kind of need to balance here. I want to go back to the original question with something that I've disagreed with, and that's all of the criticism aimed towards, you know, nonprofits such as United Way of Denton, only because I've spent a good amount of time speaking with them and attending their meetings, and you know, I have to say that they're definitely like putting in the time to case manage and, you know, meet every week to keep tabs on people. I think what should be mentioned is that they definitely face an issue with high turnover rates. So a lot of people who go to work for United Way of Denton are like college students who like leave pretty quickly to like find like to move up and find like different jobs. And so that leaves the people who do stay there for a considerable length of time, that leaves them with the challenge of like having to like implement a system that kind of gets people up to speed on like the happenings and going ons in Denton, and like keeping people in the know on things that they need to know when they do come to work for United Way of Denton County. I think their biggest issue is just a lot of red tape that comes with managing a nonprofit corporation, and it's a very bureaucratic process. And you know, when there's just a lot of like unfortunate realities that are going to happen no matter what, with people becoming homeless waiting on assistance. And it's just like there's no perfect way to go around it. And yeah, that's kind of one disagreement I have just with like what I've seen.
No, and I get it. Like it's hard, you know, running an organization like that. I get it. Like, yes, you want to help everybody. I mean, we all want there to be no homeless people in the world. But that's just the reality of that, is just it's not gonna happen. And you know, I from the people I've spoken with, it's like, yes, they're working really, really hard, but you know, with the ever growing city, like saying you're gonna 89,000 people in 20 years is a lot of people. And yes, it's going to be hard to be it for an organization like Our Daily Bread or United Way to be able to help with, yes, with that ever growing population and soaring prices of living, it's going to be hard to help everybody, you know?
Maybe we got pretty like in depth with this assignment just because I feel like we were tiptoeing borderline, like talking to city councilmen and seeing their opinion because we went around the city. I'm not gonna lie, guys. Like we talked to a lot of people in the city, and I've found out so much more about Denton than I've ever known being here since I moved here in 2019. And it put Denton into a whole new light for me. It completely changed the way I look at the city and I look at the just regular everyday people walking around on the streets. It changed how I commute around the city, just knowing different areas and knowing different shelters and places that obviously are helping out. There were parts in Denton that I've never been to that I've been to now. And it almost made me want to take it a step further because, you know, we talked to Danny Shaw and we could have gone further than that and gone straight to our biggest sources and asked them like, so what is it? What is really going on? Because we've talked to all the outsiders that y'all have been dealing with and been dealing with for years. Like Jane is from the 70s. Like she was telling us stories about her being a hippie and still dealing with this. Like she moved to Denton and the first thing she did was start tackling this problem. And that's all she's been doing her whole life, basically. So that makes me think like, why has this been going on for so long? What is it? When are we gonna eventually get to a middle ground and try to actually solve the problem rather than just talking about it and providing small little parts and little things to help us in the meantime? When are we actually going to tackle it and solve it altogether?
I think I can answer part of that with what I've seen is changes to civic engagement. And what I mean by that is something I kind of that put things into perspective for me is when I talked to former city council member Deb Armentar, and she kind of expressed like, well, how come, almost like a complaint, like, well, nobody on city council now has ever lived in an apartment. You know, they're all own land, property. Some of them are landlords. You know, of course, you know, they're not going to share the same perspectives or life experiences that these people we're talking about today are experiencing. And also, I talked to Tracy Duckworth, who wants to start a nonprofit of her own, and she told me that she would have her entire board of directors be people who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, which is, you know, a new idea that I definitely think is worth discussing.
So getting on I guess a lighter note, not lighter, but like a little bit easier to talk about. What are y'all's opinions on a tiny home village? I feel like that's such a beautiful idea. I don't want to say it's a way to just like store them, but it is a resource that is like, okay, you don't have a home. Well, here are a bunch of trailers, here are a bunch of tiny homes, here's a little village with people that are in the same situation as you. Y'all can feed off of one another, live off of one another, help each other until y'all can get back on your feet. I see it as a better option than trying to make them get jobs and do all these, you know, extra things that they can't do without a home or without the right resources, but at least provide a shelter for them to sleep in temporarily. And it would be like a rotational thing where it's like, once you get back on your feet, now you have to leave, you know, or once you get to a certain point that we can't help you any further, you have to take it on by yourself, or you can take it on by yourself. Now you have to leave. But what are y'all's opinions on that?
Based off what I saw, I'm not just saying this because Jane agreed to talk to us. I thought it was a solid idea because based off at least the articles I saw on Den Record Chronicle, or I can go fact check this later, but they have them in Washington. I know that for a fact, and I'm pretty sure there's another tiny homes village somewhere else. And they talked about how the crime rate around the area went down. I don't know if that necessarily was tied to the tiny homes, but you know, connections there. I just think I think the idea of shelter is almost undersold, or it's like so obvious that people don't even realize it. It's literally something over your head, and everyone deserves that. Like I remember as a kid, like in school or whatever, it'd be like, oh, what do you need to survive? It's like food, water, shelter. It's it's a small house that people can put their head under. And I really do think, I mean, this ties to like trying to get people to go like move people underneath bridges, move them out of there, move them out of encampments maybe. Inclement weather, like it strikes whenever, especially in Texas. That's another thing. Texas weather is crazy.
Yeah,
I don't think that's like
it's
I don't-
unpredictable.
yeah. So I mean, I've seen days where it was like sunny, perfect weather, and then a few hours later, it's like low 40s, whatever. It's raining like crazy, wind, people's stuff could blow away, and there's like a tornado. We've gotten ice recently. I mean, we haven't even talked about that. The ice storm in Dallas that knocked out the power grid.
Yeah,
Like,
a lot of people lost their lives.
Yeah.
Through that.
I think a concern, to play devil's advocate, I think a concern people would have is regulations, but on the Denton basic services website, it lists out specific guidelines, like, it's just fully autonomous, the cops can be called, so I think they have that basis covered pretty well too.
This makes sense. I mean, you never know what anyone's doing in those houses.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, the root issue of all this is like funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically the root issue to a lot of government issues, but
Well, and then the sad part is this is when Max and I went to a meeting in January. The things that we learned was funding for United Way and Our Daily Bread was running out. They were given these grants. Is what I learned from Danny Shaw. Was like the city was giving these grants during COVID to help with all this stuff. Well, that funding's running out fast, like by a couple months.
Was it from the country, like the country
The government, yeah,
like the national?
yeah.
Okay, from
And
Washington.
so the federal government gave, this is for like surrounding
Yeah.
areas like in the country and all that, gave them money to help keep these places open and help people out and all that. And then now, what Danny was telling me is like here in the next couple months when that money goes out, sadly people aren't going to be helped as they once could have in the past 2 years. You're going to go back to pre-COVID numbers, which yes, that's terrible. And then we're talking to her, she's telling me like they have their eye on a couple bills in the Texas government that would be able to help out Denton in places like that, because the majority she's telling me a lot of the bills that she's been seeing that are passed like goes to like Dallas or Houston or Austin or San Antonio, not places right outside those cities.
What do you guys think of I'm sure you guys have heard the slogan by now, to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. Have you guys heard that?
Who said that?
I've heard it from more than one source. United Way of Denton talks about that, and I've also heard people like Tracy Duckworth in so many ways call it BS. But with that said, even without knowing it beforehand, what does that slogan kind of like prompt you to feel, to make homelessness brief, rare, and non-recurring?
Well, I mean, I feel like I could see that, like that's the goal. You don't want to be homeless more than once. I mean, yeah, I would think it'd be common sense, like you do it for whatever the basic time is that you need, get out, get your job or your old life back, and then have it never happen again. Feel like that's the goal of all these organizations, I would hope.
It's like I was saying, like nobody wants to be in that position at all. And
Yeah.
once you get a taste of it, you never want to go back.
Yeah.
That causes so much trauma and PTSD where you don't want to even think about that time in your life. And it almost causes like that period, when people go through PTSD at one point they experience that blackout moment where they don't remember a large majority of their lives because it was so traumatic. These are situations that people are putting themselves into. So having that slogan of like, we don't want it to reoccur, we don't want it to happen. You can say that, but are we doing that? Are we trying to prevent that? Because I think back and I'm like, Denton, yes, is a growing town, city, but it could be so much bigger if we really tackle this crisis. Like if we really tackle it and put a stop to it, or at least get a hold of it and progressively help it, then the city could be so much more than what it is, And I think even just the tiny homes is going to put it on a map. Like a city in Texas is tackling homelessness by providing houses. What, like that title alone sounds like it should be common sense. Like, yeah, provide more houses, help them like get back on their feet. That makes sense. But nobody else is doing that. And there are people that are doing it and they're being talked about. It's being promoted everywhere. So why are we kind of behind, but also talking about how we don't want this to ever happen or we don't want it to be reoccurring? It should never be reoccurring. And it isn't for a lot of the people that do get back on their feet. They never are going to go back and they're never going to turn back.
Money is a finite resource, obviously, but I think it's more idealistic, but it's more reasonable too. One thing I think people can do to fight homelessness is raise awareness on it. And I know, like, of course, people know that their city is homelessness, but I mean, raise awareness on like why people are homeless.
And it's like, take away the stereotypes. It's not because, oh, they're doing drugs or, oh, they're an alcoholic. It's none of that.
I mean, I'll be blunt. I think there's some homeless people who put themselves in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I said earlier, people we talked to, I was surprised with how like transparent they were about like talking about people having to be removed from homeless shelters, lying about their situation, So I'm not trying to, I don't think people are necessarily trying to sugarcoat the issue, but I do think that, of course, you can't ask every homeless or person that's unsheltered their story, but I feel like if you listen, you can really start to, at the very least, empathize with what they're going through. Like, I'm not going to speak on people's personal stories, but there's some really screwed up stuff that people go through, off camera, like talking about it. It's bad. And I think that's one thing that people just kind of neglect is that I think we're lucky. I think there's a lot of lucky people in the world that, didn't have to experience stuff like that. Some people have the resources to get themselves out of homelessness. Others don't, and like I said, I really just do think that, I mean, funding's finite, they ain't going to give us all the money, the government, but to really fight the issue, I do think that people can be a little more aware of homelessness and how every case is different. Not everyone that's panhandling has ill intentions. It's up to you if you want to give people money or not. That's up to you. But people sitting underneath the bridge, sitting in a shelter, they deserve the right to have basic amenities.
It's almost like how Jane was saying that like the ones that actually did not put themselves in the situation and actually want to get out, they're not out in the open. They're not just, strolling around in the streets. They're in hiding. They're embarrassed. They're upset. They're frustrated with their situation. They're trying to get help. They're in these shelters. They're trying to get back on their feet. They're doing it all the little things that they possibly can. But the ones that obviously put themselves in that situation, you can kind of tell the difference and you kind of can see the difference as well. But not everyone that is without a home is obviously innocent to their situation. And that's just the truth of it. There are people out there that are abusing their situation, don't really even realize that they're in a situation. They're just looking for the next, whatever. But in this case, it's almost like just have a conversation with one or two people in those shelters. A majority of the people in those shelters are the ones that are in hiding and want to get back on their feet, because those conversations get really intense. In the interview we just did today, like the woman that works at Our Daily Bread, she cried. She broke down because of something that had happened that morning while we were sitting there and waiting around, she heard a few stories, and I had asked her, how do you detach yourself from this place and the things that you see and hear emotionally when you go home? And she was like, I don't. It's really hard for her because she got her first teenager and that broke her heart. And imagine working in a shelter and seeing a teenager, someone that's so innocent, so young, and has so much life ahead of them, already in a struggling position before her life even started, or him or her life even started. That's really tough to watch and really tough to understand. And it's almost like that shows that there is some sympathy that you have to give these people. There is some like emotional aspect that you actually have to tap into to show that not everyone is out here taking advantage of the resources that we're providing for them. A majority of the ones that are taking advantage of the resources are the ones that need it, and they should be taking advantage of it.
It's a difficult issue. I mean, all the other groups are probably dealing with difficult stuff, but I mean, this is really a broad and at the same time very detailed, complicated issue. And I feel like that's probably the case for a lot of cities.
I mean, imagine, like, yes, Denton's growing, but I'm sure places like Dallas, New York, Chicago, I mean, we kind of see the stuff on social media and all that about San Francisco. It's like, yeah, it's a big issue everywhere.
So I guess let me ask you guys, during this process and with learning everything that we've learned, has this changed your opinion on just homelessness? Has it changed you morally, emotionally, in any kind of way? Like I said, it's changed the way I've just moved as a person that lives in Denton in general, and the way I see Denton and the way I see people that don't have homes differently. I give a lot more sympathy now. I take the time to actually understand their situation, and or just care about their situation, rather than just being like, oh well, I don't have any money, it is what it is. Like,
I'd say for me personally, and I'm sure all of us think this too, it's just instilled more into me of what I've always believed, of how grateful that we are for what we have. Grateful to be able to go take a shower whenever I want. Grateful to have AC when it's 115 degrees outside. Grateful to have the heater when it's 29 degrees with wind chill, whatever. To me, it's just, this whole thing has just further put the value of being grateful for what you have, because there are so many other people in the world that would love to trade spots with you.
For me, I know like Garrett, it sounds like your bottom line is kind of like funding. And for me, it kind of goes down to a matter of definition and being on the same page and transparency, and kind of realizing that a lot of people I talk to in these different nonprofits and organizations and factions are kind of like, I mean, first off, they all want the same thing. They're all vying for the same thing. And they're using the same definitions, but I think a lot of things just get lost in translation, especially with like this housing first model. You have people, in city council, going to city council saying we need to adopt housing first. We need to adopt housing first. And then I'll talk to people with like United Way of Denton County, and they're like, well, we do, like when we manage our housing navigation, we always go by a housing first policy. So it's just confusing. And again, I think it speaks to me on just like needing to be on the same page, especially with the, you know, the fact that Denton is rapidly growing. It's in numerical growth, it's the fourth fastest growing city, at least from the period of 2021 to 2022. For me, it doesn't necessarily, everything we've learned in this capstone hasn't changed anything for me, but maybe reaffirmed some beliefs that I had. So I'm somebody who's already iffy on capitalism, but just kind of seeing homelessness as a cause reaffirms my beliefs that capitalism is bad, and being profit driven, managing companies in a profit driven way, and ignoring industry in America by like finding cheap labor costs in other countries leads to, you know, less employment opportunities, which leads to less ways to combat the rising costs in rent, which, you know, leads to more homelessness. So for me, it just kind of, again, reaffirms beliefs that I already had. Yep.
Like I said earlier, the biggest thing that I noticed in my perception is I talked about it earlier, how like homelessness is like it can be such a silent assassin with how it just sneaks up on people. And that is something that I just did not realize. I feel like I grew up with the impression that becoming homelessness was always like this great fall from grace. You know, there was like this long story about, you know, I got addicted to something and then I lost my job and then, this whole line of stuff. But we talked with Jane's friend and hearing other stories, if like a few bad luck, or I don't know the word, bad circumstances, and then you're right there on the streets. And that's something that I don't know, it was so obvious, but there's something I just never realized, that is that easy to become homeless.
Yeah, it's like it's another thing that I've learned too, just interacting with people through this class was like we all know, just like that. You know, it can happen, whether it's car accident, whether it's, you know, a surgery, or just unfortunate circumstances happen. And just like that, you're in a bad spot.
Yeah, Jane's friend definitely put it into perspective, because it really did just sneak up on her and hit her like a ton of bricks. And one thing that I asked her that was such a simple, quick answer for her was, do you have any friends or family out here? And she said no. She's the only one here. She doesn't have any family, nothing. And she said that so simple, didn't even make a reaction. She was just like, no, it's just me. That's it. And I didn't really internalize that until after. And I was like, when you think about it, the reason we don't see it as something that happens so often, or something that could happen so easily, is because we all have family. Like, we all have someone to fall on, or something to fall back on if it came down to that for us. Like, we have parents that we could go to and kind of just tell them our situation, and they'll take us right back in. I have siblings. I don't know if y'all do, but I for sure have siblings that I could call and be like, hey, I'm kind of in a terrible situation right now. I need help. I have uncles, aunts, and just extended family that I could call. I have friends that will definitely pick me up like it's nothing. So we have more resources than them. When you don't have anybody around you, not even just in the city, like at all. She has no family at all. If you have no family whatsoever, it's just you. And if you fall, there's no one there to like pick you up and help you fix your situation. And when you have such high morals, it also makes it really hard to ask for help, especially from people that don't know you that well, or people that you know and know you, but it's like, I shouldn't be putting this kind of problem onto those people, you know, like boyfriends or any other like extra relationships. You shouldn't have to lean on certain people in your life that's where it almost gets so hard and so lonely, because it's like you really are just doing this by yourself. And when you don't have those resources to help you, it's like you're really just alone. Like not even the government wants to help you. That sucks. That hurts. Yeah.
One thing, I mean, y'all dealt more with like the city side of the issue. Well, I feel like Zara and I dealt with more the outside, like you were talking about. One thing I will say though, that I noticed is that the people I talk to, at least, they really do care about this issue. And I think that
Yeah.
was like the heart of our project when we were like, Professor Loftus was trying to narrow down like what our central question is, what what's the city doing, or what are people in the city doing. There are really people that want to solve this.
And so I'll for sure talk about that, because that's what, Danny Shaw was telling me, was like, look, like the council knows this is a big issue. It gets talked about all the time in or frequently in council meetings. If it wasn't an issue, these our daily bread wouldn't be here. The council faces these issues head on, knowing that this is going to be a huge city in 20-30 years. So they know that they need to be prepared, be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to this issue. So trying to hit it as best they can. Obviously, yes, the funding and things like that are going to always be an issue, but they are trying.
Yeah, and there's definitely hope, coming Denton's way. I don't think anybody disagrees that the new Our Daily Bread shelter fills a hole that was needed. It fills a demand, it fills a need that the city had. I talked to people who say 10, 20 years ago, the only option that people had was Salvation Army, and they only had like 10, 12, 14 beds available each night. So it would be remiss to say that there hasn't been progress made and that there isn't going to be in the future. I know I talked to somebody at United Way of Denton County who said that the city is considering putting rapid rehousing funding towards giving grace and Our Daily Bread. So that's good. And I think these things with the debates over the ordinance policy are just, small hiccups that need to be smoothed out along the way. But I think Denton is in good shape, and I think Denton is in good hands for years to come. And I think there's the infrastructure in place and there's the people in place to help solve it and figure it out.
It's a good thing that people care, because I mean, like we talked about, we felt that there might be a sense of discourse or disconnect between the different organizations, but at the very least, people are trying to make a difference. Because if that wasn't the case, I don't think we'd be in this room talking about, we wouldn't have a central question. So at the very least, it's good that the people in the city are trying to combat homelessness, and I think that's important for us to talk about, because I think that this issue at the very least deserves awareness.
Yeah. I think overall, just heightening the situation and letting the people of Denton know like this is something that is occurring. It's kind of getting pushed around and it's being tackled, and then it's getting pushed on the back burner, and then it's coming back up. So I feel like we really brought it to the attention of Denton's citizens, they would care just as much as the people that are actually trying to work within it. And it will become a bigger situation. It will become a bigger issue, rather than just talking about the culture of Denton and, the art scene of Denton and the little indie vibe of Denton. I think actually talking about Denton, Texas as its own is super important at the end of the day.
Yeah, because people like citizens need to realize like the city's trying. I mean, they are trying to be proactive because they know the city's going to is already exploding with population and will continue for the next decades. And they're trying to get the situation fixed. Like, obviously, like, you know, like we all know you can't help everybody, but they're trying to maximize the number of people they can help. And just, I've even noticed the difference between, you know, I live in urban. Denton does a lot more regarding that issue than Irving does.
All right, well, I think that wraps up our conversation. If you guys are interested to learn more, we will have a website up and running soon, as well as our posted videos and podcast episode and some more data, facts, and information for you guys to look at. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you for joining us today.